Hi, I'm Courtney,
And I'm Bryce.
and we have been living and traveling full-time in our van for 3 months now. And we're going to make a video about how we afford to do that.
So I guess the first thing to point out is we don't really afford to do it. The whole time that we've been living and traveling in our van, we've been living off our savings.
Yeah, so we lived in Jacksonville for 3.5 years, and we had regular full-time jobs. And at first, we saved to buy a house and all that normal stuff, and then we decided that we actually wanted to travel first. So we started saving pretty aggressively for that the last year or so of our time there. So we ended up setting aside $20,000 as our travel budget.
So how did we save $20,000? Well, Courtney and I got married about 4 years ago, right after we graduated from college. So we had no money, but fortunately we also had no debt. So it was a completely clean slate. We got full-time jobs in Jacksonville, Florida. Courtney was working as a nanny, and I was working as an environmental engineer. And we decided to save aggressively towards the next phase of our life, which we thought would be buying a house, but in turn it turned into buying a van and traveling the US. So in order to save aggressively, we set a budget. And a lot of our budget was based on books by Dave Ramsey, who is basically just a concrete advice for finances kind of guy. So we have a lot of core budgeting principles that just came straight from his books. And I'll just go over some of those that really helped us to save money. So some basic principles of the budget we set. We spent less than 25% of our total take-home pay on our rent. We also set aside another 15% of our income to be invested for our retirement. So that doesn't count the savings that we were saving for a down payment on a house or to buy a van and travel. 15% of our pay was going towards retirement. We also have a chunk of money that's our emergency fund, which we won't touch, and that's in case we lost our jobs. Now we quit our jobs, but it's still an umbrella emergency fund. If the van broke down and we ran out of money tomorrow, at least we could go back and use our emergency fund to restart our lives. So then there's just the basics of budgeting, which is trying to spend less money. So we tried to cook as many meals at home as we could while still allowing ourselves to eat out every once in a while to enjoy ourselves. We also tried not to buy too much alcohol because beer and wine can end up being really expensive. And we just tried not to buy things that we didn't absolutely need.
So about a year before we left was when we decided that we wanted to travel. And that's when we started coming up with other ways that we could make some extra money to add to our travel budget. One of those ways was that Bryce started tutoring online, and I started babysitting a lot more on the weekends and in the evenings. I also went through all of my stuff because I needed to get rid of a lot anyway, and I sold it on apps like Let Go and Poshmark, which are basically just places you can list your things and people buy them from you. And then there's also an app called Ibotta where you can get money back from purchases like groceries and stuff. So all of that extra little stuff just really added up to help out with the budget.
So I began tutoring through Chegg to save extra money for our travel, but also because it would be a good online job while we were traveling. Now, since for this first 3 months of our travels, we've been spending a bunch of time in national parks or out on public lands where we have no access to Wi-Fi and often don't even have cell coverage, it's been pretty hard to work online. But we could always adjust our lifestyle to be in cities more, working from coffee shops or libraries when our budget starts to go dry and we really need that extra income.
And I just found out that they have these websites where you can transcribe stuff and make not very much money at all, but I wanted something to do while Bryce was working, so now I have that. And I haven't made much yet, but it'll be good.
So after being on the road for about 3 months now, we have a pretty good idea of what our monthly expenses look like. First, we have our concrete living expenses, which really don't change month to month. And the core of that is our insurances. So we have our van and renter's insurance and our health insurance. So our van and renter's insurance are combined, and it covers all the contents that we have in our van and the vehicle itself. Our health insurance is through a health sharing platform. So it's not technically insurance, but there is a pool of people that pay a monthly share, pretty much an insurance premium, and then health expenses get covered by the pool and not by a massive insurance company. So those two together, we spend about $250 a month. So our next major living expense is food. And like I said before, we don't live like we're on vacation. We cook 95% of our meals on the little Coleman stove that we keep under the bed. Every once in a while, we'll treat ourselves, or if the van's in the shop and we don't have access to their stove, we'll get ourselves something to eat. But for the most part, we're cooking our food and we're budget friendly with the way we eat. So altogether, food comes out to be about $500 a month, or about $125 per week. This is pretty much in line with what we were spending when we were living in our apartment in Jacksonville.
So our biggest expense is definitely gas, and we're at about $650 a month for that. We've spent $2,000 total on this trip, but we've gone 10,000 miles. So we could drive less and spend less on gas, but the point of this trip is to travel around and see places, so it's kind of an unavoidable expense. When our budget starts to get a little lower, maybe we'll drive less, but for now, it is what it is. So our next expense is lodging, and we've spent about $500 in the past 3 months on this. Most of that came from campsites that we had to pay for when there wasn't anywhere to stay for free. The beginning of our trip, we spent a lot more time in actual campgrounds because there weren't a lot of options for dispersed camping. But now, it's been a while since we've paid for a campsite now. And also in that cost is 2 nights in a hotel in Vegas. So that comes out to about $175 a month, but that isn't really an accurate monthly cost for us because the past month we probably haven't spent anything on lodging, so that cost has definitely decreased.
So our final expense is repairs to the van. We were thinking that our only monthly expense would be, regular oil changes, plus maybe a repair here or there. And that was the case for about the first 2.5 months. The last 2 weeks, we've gotten incredibly unlucky. We had a pretty significant oil leak, and then the mechanic took advantage of us and just redid our whole front brake system. But that's another story. And then we also had to get a new radiator and track down another pesky coolant leak. So our repair expenses were looking really good until we were hit with these larger repair costs. So overall, we've spent $1,350 on repairs in the past 3 months, but probably $1,200 of that is just in these last 2 weeks. So overall, we've spent $450 per month on repairs, but we're really expecting that cost should be more like $50 to $100 a month for an oil change and then any other miscellaneous repair. So overall, with all these expenses, we spend about $2,000 a month so far. But we really think the repair costs will be cut down, and we could always easily cut down on gas by just traveling less. So we could probably get our expenses down to between $1,000 and $1,500 a month.
So with Bryce's online tutoring job, we're able to supplement that a little bit. And so far, he has made $1,300 in the past 3 months, which is a little over $400 a month. And if we traveled less and made more time for sitting in coffee shops with Wi-Fi and working, we could probably start to break even if our budget starts to run out at the end.
Right. If you or someone you know needs tutoring, go ahead and message me. I will link it below. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about giving to charity. This is something that Courtney and I feel pretty strongly about, and since we have no income, we don't really have any extra money that we can give to charity. But luckily, when we were working our full-time jobs, we took this very seriously and gave about 10% of our income to various charities. One of the ones we gave to is called Kiva, and it's a microfinance loan institution that basically helps administer zero-interest loans to people in need, specifically people in developing countries. So many of the loans on Kiva go towards people who are trying to improve their lives in the most basic of ways, build a working bathroom, be able to plant more crops to then harvest more. Since they are loans, the principal gets paid back. So over the course of 3.5 years, Courtney and I were able to donate over $6,000 in loans through Kiva. But the beauty of this is that since they are loans, they're continually being paid back. So our investment of $6,000 to people in need through Kiva has turned into over $16,000 of loans that we've funded.
Wow.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about this is that even while we're traveling, though we don't have any net income that we can give towards charitable causes, we still have loans being paid back through Kiva. So every month we have about $400 that we're able to loan out on Kiva to people in need. So I'm also going to put a link to Kiva down below so that you can check that out.
So that's it. That's how we make all of this work. Thanks for watching. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll let you know when the money runs out. Hopefully it doesn't.
Thank you.
I know, it feels weird that we're talking about, okay, it's not the end of the world. It's a casual video.
Oftentimes. I hate that. I hate that.
We live like we're traveling, because we are.
Traveling is different than vacation. If you or someone you know needs tutoring, go ahead and message me. I will link it below.